Welcome to Jim's Moving Picture Show, where the popcorn is evil, the jokes will come to life, and the movies are scary or funny. Well, the whole thing's a little all over the place. Jump in as we go through the best and worst flicks in cinema history. And now your host of the Moving Picture Show, a guy who's seen Halloween a million times, has 1,000 Michael Myers t-shirts and speaks fluent movie quotes. A guy who should get out of the coffin a little bit more. Here's your host, Jim Christopher.
Hey everybody, Jim back with Jim's Movin' Picture Show, and we're going to continue talking about horror movies as we wrap up the Halloween season. I'm already starting to miss October. I really, really am. Next big movie season is December, Christmas. And then after that, if you're a baseball fan, it's a long time to wait for spring training to start. But I digress. Passionate fan bases are always going to jump to conclusions like they've got the Matt from Office Space on news about a film that they don't particularly like. And this isn't new to the internet age. It seems like it is because we can all read it and see it and it's kind of right in our faces. But if the internet had existed when if the internet had existed when Michael Keaton was cast as Batman, it might have melted. So let's not pretend that fans have somehow gotten worse. They've just gotten amplified. One of the things that triggers people is when they see something different or something that they thought was kind of precious and religious and untouchable get changed. And look, some of those reasons when fanboys are have an immediate reaction, I think is correct. Flames on Optimus Prime was dumb as fuck. Why? First of all, he's this noble leader guy, and he's just going to roll around on a hot rod. It doesn't seem super believable to me. And again, people trashed the new Crow movie, and I saw the trailer and thought, no, thanks you. Maybe it works for someone else. I would suggest watching the original. One of the things, though, that triggers fans, horror fans especially, is the word reboot or remake. I don't know how we feel about requel because the word's new, but we just automatically, as a culture, think that just because something was done once, it can't ever be done before. I am not necessarily Mr. Anti reboot or remake guy. I generally speaking will give the movie a chance based on its own merits. Maybe the one exception to that in horror was the Psycho remake because he came out talking about how he made a shot for shot remake of Hitchcock's film. Well, you don't want to watch me try to paint the Mona Lisa again because it's not going to be really good. It's not like you want to watch me repaint the Mona Lisa. Leonardo da Vinci, or I think that was the turtle who painted, whichever Ninja Turtle painted it, did a great job. We don't need to do it again. And Gus Van Sant promised that he was doing a shot for shot remake. I've watched selected scenes, and yeah, it's a shot for shot remake. Therefore, unnecessary. I actually quite like a lot of the horror remakes that have come out in the last 20, 25, 30, 35 years. And number 10 is pretty controversial because I do not hate, I actually quite like a lot of what is done in the Omen 666 because it came out on June 2006. That is marketing you can't buy, friends. Yes, the movie isn't perfect, mostly because Julia Stiles is in it. And I really like the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, but I hated that it made the illusion that Julia Stiles could act. You know, that's one of the great sins on American pop culture. But Liev Schreiber's in the movie. They do a lot of homage to the original film, but add some new stuff. It's a little more gory. So it's not as good as the original film, but definitely still a fun movie to watch if you can ignore Julia Stiles.
There's something about Damien.
I was at the hospital the night your son was born.
What do you know about my son?
Everything.
He bears a birthmark, a sequence of sixes.
From the eternal sea he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother, till man exists no more. Your son, the son of the devil.
We're going to get into some sacrilege territory where I'm going to talk about how the remake, in some ways, is my favorite of the series or one of my favorites. And I'm going to begin with the 2009 Friday the 13th. Not just because it was shot here in Austin, Texas, but look, it's a good movie. I understand the complaint that essentially it's a greatest hits montage of the original films. But I think it's still fun. It's fun to see Jason kind of athletic, kind of how he was at the beginning of the original movies. The sleeping bag over the fire of all the movie kills, that thing is amazing. And these are not my words, but one of the characters, but we've got a set of stupendous breasts in the movie. That's not why I like the movie. But I do really dig it. I do think like that Jerry Padalecki is in the movie. And while watching it, it gave birth to a short film I did that was legitimately stolen from me, Freaky Friday the 13th. So if you haven't seen it since it came out, give it another chance. It's actually, I think, better than you'll remember.
All right, you ready?
Ready, let's do it!
This is a man's sport.
There's a guy out there carrying the 8 dead bodies.
Bring trouble.
This is one that I definitely like better than the original film. And that is because I don't like Sissy Spacek. I never have. I know she's a coal miner's daughter. The only thing I like her in is in Four Christmases when she's Vince Vaughn's mom banging his best friend. And that's just funny. So when the remake came out, I was into it. I like, and Julianne Moore for me steals the movie as the super sacrilegious mother. Alert, alert. We interrupt your program to bring you Daniel Baldwin, contributing writer for the horror website Dread Central. So, as we've been talking about remakes and requels, which is a name that we didn't have until Scream 2022 came out, we've got our expert on here, Daniel Baldwin. Daniel, are you open to the remake, or are you the guy that's like, don't mess with it? It's perfect the way it was.
It just depends on what it is. If we're talking an actual remake, there's some movies that probably shouldn't be touched, at least not for a long time, or unless someone has a really radical take. As far as reboots or requels that work in some form of continuity with previous films, as long as they're done well, I'm open to them. Multiple timelines can really irritate a fan base, but sometimes it works out well.
I feel like because as a longtime comic book reader, I was way more prepared for this Oh yeah, I can totally understand when this is a prequel or when we're in a different universe or whatever. Like, it wasn't that big a stretch for me. I'm sure it wasn't for you, but for a lot of people,
No.
it really vexes them.
It vexes them and it can confuse them, and I'm not making fun of these people that I'm about to bring up at all. It's just we all view things differently. But I've come across people in life who think that Batman Begins is meant to be a part of the Burton and Schumacher, Batman movies, or that the Daniel Craig James Bond movies are meant to slot into the original 20 film series.
Yeah.
So they get confused when you have elements that are pulled from previous iterations and done differently because, in their mind, it's a weird retcon when in fact, we're just talking separate series.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, that the Bond example, because even the continuity of the first 20 movies or whatever is very loose. They only borrow from it when they want to, if it moves a plot point at that very time. Like, they're not really sequels of each other.
Yep, I agree. And that can be said for a lot of the requels that we've gotten, most of which have really only come, reboots and requels really only come in the last, I don't know, decade or so, but there are a couple earlier examples.
Okay, well, why don't we hear your 5? I'm very curious about this list from you.
This was a little tough for me, and I'm sure I probably left off a few films that may be on your list or maybe not. I think the 2021 Candyman movie is great. I like Evil Dead Rise. I like the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, but none of those made the cut here. So my first one actually comes from this year, which is The First Omen.
Oh yeah, I walked out thinking, I know we overuse the word, but like masterpiece was one of the things I thought, and I thought how random for a requel film to capture the spirit of the original, but also create a whole different thing of itself. It was beautiful. I think it was well written, well acted. Yeah, I love that movie.
So did I. And next up on my list is the 2022 Hellraiser reboot.
Okay, I'm glad to hear you like that. I liked it too, but I find myself liking some of the remakes and requels of franchises I never was really into, and so I'm kind of
Mhm,
getting like the criticism of the 2009 Friday the 13th. Is that when it was?
mhm.
Um, that was kind of a greatest hits, but at the time
Yep.
I didn't know the album, so I was fine with the greatest hits. All right, next up.
Next up is the 20 Scream 2022 or Scream 5, whichever way you want to call it, which is a fully in continuity sequel, but it just kind of jump started the franchise again after a decade on ice.
Yeah, and obviously we know the issues that they're having with Scream 8, but at least it
Yeah.
looked like had done a natural progression of movie the story to a next generation with having to be awkward about it. I think I think it was really, really well done. Um, next up.
Next up is Halloween 2018, which there we go into the multiple timelines thing because there's I'm not sure there's any horror franchise that has more timelines than the Halloween one at this point.
Well, there's 3, right? If you count zombie, there's 4.
Yeah. And probably will be 5 whenever we get something else new.
Yeah, because Jamie Lee Curtis has 2 of them.
Mhm.
Yep. And then your last one.
The last one functions more on the reboot than the requel end of things, and it folds back into an ongoing conversation that we've had about this series, and that is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. And the reason I include that is
Hmm.
it's a clean break after the first 5 because now we're into zombie Jason territory and it's a full on horror comedy.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a interesting. I never looked at it that way. Like I said, I've only seen it a couple of times, but um wow. Yeah, I need to rewatch it with that eye on that. Um Halloween 2018. I'm curious as to does the end of the movie devalue what the sorry, somebody's looking at my window. Does the end of the series and how disappointing that was for most people. First of all, were you disappointed in Halloween Ends or did you enjoy it?
I I enjoyed parts of it. I think counter to the way the internet thinks, I don't really have a problem with the entire Corey and Allison storyline. I think that stuff's really well done. It feels like that's the plot arc in the film that the writers and the directors were really interested in. I think as far as a Michael and Laurie movie, it's a huge letdown. But in general, but especially after the way things went in Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. So it was a disappointment, but Halloween 2018 and in my opinion, Halloween Kills are so good that it doesn't really harm them in retrospect. Like I can not I guess it's the franchise version of separating the artist from the art. I can
Yeah, I agree with both of those things. I think the whole concept of Corey and evil being contagious would have been so fascinating in its own movie. And
mhm.
then instead of um promising a thing at the end of Halloween Kills, and then we just sort of are led to forget it so that Halloween Ends can start. So yeah, I agree with you on both those points. All right. Well, that does wrap up our remakes and requels with Daniel Baldwin. Daniel, thanks so much for spending October with us.
Happy to do it.
Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
How about a remake that I really like as much as I like the original one, and that is Fright Night. First of all, Anton Yelchin, what can I say? Died horribly, a horrible, tragic accident that deprived us of an actor that I think was going to have a really good, fun future. So if you just need to see more movies with him in it, there you go. And while not as big a stretch as the Penguin, actually, maybe not a stretch at all, Colin Farrell as the bloodthirsty, really handsome vampire. Yeah, not a stretch at all. Really handsome guy. Got the front tuck going. You can't miss it. McLovin as the vampire expert in the movie. It's probably one you missed. I don't think it did very well in the box office, but if you like the originals, I think you will like this one.
I repel you with the power of Christ the Lord.
Do you? Really? It's a mighty big cross you got there, Charlie. The question is, do you have faith? Get back! Charlie, not the cross. Charlie, not the cross, Charlie.
Coming in at number 6, and it would have been higher if not for the ending, but I said I was a big Wolfman fan, and that does include the Benicio del Toro, the Wolfman. First of all, the cast is stacked. I mean, Anthony Hopkins, the list goes on and on and on. The film allows itself to be gorier than the original because of effects, and it's a little bit more in depth and brooding in the performance of Larry. I get that it's not the original film, and what I like about this is because there's almost 100 years separating the two movies. You really can see the difference in technology, the change outs, the transformation scene. I think is the best of any werewolf movie, including American Werewolf in London, which I think is fine, but it's not higher or lower if you're counting down, because I do think the end result of the two werewolf battle is a little lame. And it does feel like an on-set decision of, what we need? We need one more werewolf. Maybe we should have saved that for the sequel. That said, I don't understand why it gets any of the hate. I think it's well performed. The special effects are great, and it just creates an excellent atmosphere of foreboding.
He's been quite seriously injured.
Thank you for staying with me.
Now we know it's still out there.
You were bitten by the beast. You bear his mark now.
Do you believe in curses? You have to leave.
What are you afraid of?
There are those who doubt the power to change men into beasts. A beast has come among us.
We're going to a requel territory now. And in fact, when I was looking at my spreadsheet, I was like, why do I have Halloween on there? And did I put Zombies Halloween because it's a remake? But no, we're back into requel territory. Halloween 2018. There are a lot of story problems in this film, and I'm a devotee to this series. I actually studied Halloween as part of my final project at the University of Texas Film School, and I love this franchise. I even like the bad ones, except for Zombies Halloween 2. Ugh, I like Season of the Witch better than that one. If you get past the fact that the story doesn't make any sense, that it's 40 years after Laurie Strode was attacked the first night, and she's been waiting for Michael Myers to come out, and he never came out, why is she waiting? Why is she Super Prepper Girl? If they had connected it to the other series of movies Jamie Lee Curtis was in, particularly Halloween H2O, you can see her go from complete alcoholic train wreck to I am now going to be prepared to fight Michael again because he's already come after me once. So if you get past that, it's a great film. It's brutal. There's a lot of really, really cool scenes. There's some really cool brindle German shepherds, of which I have one now. Is that why? Funny story though. The Omen, the remake, has a black German shepherd in it, and my wife was like, "Oh my god, I want one." That's the movie. That's the dog you want. The dog that's bringing on the devil. You want to? Okay, there you go. But again, Halloween and Halloween Kills. I'll throw that in there too. Great movies. Halloween Ends. Take it out.
I'm leaving, right? I don't.
Put the ball! Ow! Oh my god! Ah! Ah! Somebody help me, please! Please! Please, somebody! Somebody please help me! Please! Please, somebody help me!
Alert. Alert. This program has been interrupted. Now hosting is host of the show Gary Talks, Gary C. Warren. Alert. Alert. This program has been interrupted. Now hosting is host of the show Gary Talks, Gary C. Warren. And this is going to be our last Halloween episode, everybody. Now, this is not the last time we're going to see Gary because he's going to be a regular fixture on this show. That was him getting drafted, by the way. He hasn't been told that yet.
I need a baseball cap, with the logo on it to put on.
You need to hold your jersey up. We're now discussing the third rail of horror movies when we're talking about remakes, reboots, and then the new term we're using, requels. I pointed out in the opening that I'm not going to be your guy that's going to be anti-remake because a remake exists. Where is your take on it? I mean, do you feel like there's everything's untouchable, or do you give the movie a chance based on?
I'm probably I would prefer they never make remakes, honestly. If I
Okay.
had to, if I'm held to the fire, I would say no remakes ever. Requels, reboots, a little bit more of a wiggle room there. And while there have been some phenomenal remakes of movies I never thought they should have done, I think that they're batting, under the Mendoza line here, and I would rather them just not try.
Movie nerds, that is a baseball reference. A good one, too, by the way. All right. Well, what is your number 5 if I have to put a gun to your head?
Number 5 is the 2022, right? Yeah, okay. I had to look at the year because it's just called Scream. I do hate whenever a movie that's not a straight remake just has the title and it's like, well, which Scream is it? Now I got to look at the year. But Scream 2022, I thought they did a great job of kind of rebooting the franchise with some new heroes, new cast, while still paying respect to the original and bringing the original our original heroes back for this one.
The use of the name Scream reminds me of like when a country singer decides to have a self-titled album 4 albums in. Like you couldn't think of anything like I
And
don't
I
know.
just, the letter M has a V right there in it. All they had to do was do Scream with a red V in the M, and then it's Scream 5, even if they don't want to call it that.
This is why you're 17 times more successful than me. All right, number 4.
Number 4 is one that you and I talked about a little bit because I wasn't sure whether this counts as a reboot or a requel. It's certainly not a remake, but it's Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I think it was definitely ahead of the game. It came out a little too early. Wes continued some of this same kind of meta commentary with Scream
Sure.
and did it a little bit better. But I loved the way that they made it about the real world. They're making this movie about Freddy Krueger, but there really is a Freddy Krueger who got into Wes Craven's dreams, which is what made him write the movie. I thought it was really smart. And, it kind of set itself up for a sequel, and had it made more money, maybe they would have continued it, and then it would have for sure been a requel.
Yeah, I was watching the Never Sleep Again documentary, and he even talked about it being sort of a soft reboot of the franchise to sort of fix what had been broken. Wes Craven's he was a little hated all the sequels. Not all the sequels deserved the hate, but he definitely that was definitely his goal. All right, what is your third?
Number 3 for me is one that I thought should have been an untouchable film. They should never have made a remake of it, but they did. I was against the remake until I saw it, and that is Evil Dead, the Evil Dead remake that came out in 2013. I, was against it. I love Evil Dead. I'm like, no way they can make this movie. It's going to be horrible. Now they're not going to have Ash in it. They're going to have a female Ash. What's going on? And it's one of those times that teaches me, even at this age, sometimes just shut up and watch it and wait and see. I
Okay, let
think
me ask you this. What made it stand on its own for you? What made it feel like it could coexist with the other ones?
because it felt completely different. It didn't feel like other than the simple fact of they've got the Book of the Dead and they've got the cabin. It didn't feel like they were just trying to go note for note what the original one was. I think the fact that the gore was insanely awesome helps a lot with a franchise like this. I think it helps that Evil Dead became more of a comedy horror and this took it even scarier than what the original was.
Mm.
And I think it also dealt with a little bit better themes than the original Evil Dead with, she has a drug addiction or, she's trying to rehab from a drug addiction. And I think it causes maybe a little bit of doubt. Is this real? Is this not real? And at the very least, it helps you understand her friends for not immediately being like, she's obviously possessed by a demon because they think she's just going through withdrawals.
Okay, did you like the most recent one, Evil Dead Rises, I think?
I liked it. I didn't like it as much. The
Mhm.
opening was killer. I thought the opening was one of my favorite openings, right up to the title sequence, and then after that, it was okay. I like the idea of trying to take it into a high rise. We've seen the cabin in the woods plenty. So
Yeah.
I liked a lot of the stuff about it, but I feel this made the mistake of trying too hard to be like the Evil Dead remake in tone and characters as opposed to trying to strike out on its own.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Because I'm gonna dive into this franchise probably starting on Sunday because my wife's out of town. All right, Luke, what about your last two?
So number 2 is just like Evil Dead, a movie that I didn't think should be remade, but that was the Dawn of the Dead remake in 2004. I actually, and this is sacrilege to zombie fans, but I think it is better than George Romero's original.
Is this the one made by the
By
guy who
Zack
ruined
Snyder.
Superman? Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Guy
it's,
Rubens.
Zack Snyder, written by James Gunn, so it's 2 Superman guys now who did it. But I felt like it was fun. It had great commentary, had great characters, had great gore. It had the scene where they're shooting zombies that look like celebrities. And they're like, shoot the guy that looks like Burt Reynolds. And then you see a guy like a zombie with a mustache and a members only jacket. Like that sums up it's scary, but it's fun. And I think it is of straight up remakes, the greatest remake ever made.
Okay, what is your number one?
Number 1 for me is what I think is the greatest requel ever made, and that is Ghostbusters Afterlife. I think they were able to thread the needle exactly of making a new cast, but paying respect and love to the original, bringing in the original actors at just the right moment, had the tone of the original, had everything that we loved about the first Ghostbusters in a whole new way. Would I have preferred them to not do Gozer again and Zool? And yeah, it might have been a little bit better, but at the same time, it worked. It worked for what the movie was, and I think they did it brilliantly.
Man, I think it's a genius choice. Especially because like it actually ends up being the most dramatic of the films with the most emotional involvement.
Yeah.
And I kind of get the complaint about the Zool thing. I wonder if that was just about okay, the audience knows this person, so we can get why Egon's freaked out. Let's move on. But
Yeah, and I
speaking of
think if Frozen Empire shows us anything, that creating a brand new villain isn't the easiest thing in the world. So sometimes it's better to the devil you know.
yeah, you think we'll get another one out of this creative team?
I'm thinking no.
You
I
think?
I think that the budget was high. It made some money but didn't make a lot of money, and I think that unless they have a killer idea, I think we might have seen the last in this form. I could see cartoons, comic books, video games, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Well, that would be a real bummer. Even though I didn't love Frozen Empire, I would love to see another crack at it. Obviously. All right. Speaking of another crack, he is Gary C. Warren. He will be back on the show. Until then, Gary, good luck with Gary Talks, and we will see you at the movies.
Thanks a lot, man.
Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Back to requel category, the 2022 version of Scream. It did what 4 tried to do even better. It was a natural, organic handoff, bringing it to a new generation of Woodsboro kids, and a new killer is on the loose. I love the turn of seeing Billy Loomis sort of in the air and in his daughter Samantha Carpenter's. Get it? Carpenter? There's really not a whole lot about the movie that I don't like. And I actually thought the 6th one that came out after it was even better because they did such a good job of dialing up the tension. The sad thing, though, is because of contracts and disagreements and whatever, it doesn't look like that thread's going to get to continue because of a loss of cast. My hope is it gets back on track, but I have no doubt that they're going to come up with a 7th movie that really will knock our socks off because they've already done so well bringing all of these movies along. Again, for Scream, and why I said it was the most complete horror franchise out there, is we're 6 movies deep, and none of them are as bad as Season of the Witch.
Doors unlocked. All doors locked. Doors unlocked.
We're going back into foreboding territory. I prefer the remake to Texas Chainsaw Massacre than I do the original.
He's killing him!
Who's killing who?
What's wrong with you people?
Oh, my.
Number 2 on my remake requel list that you really should see if you haven't seen it. It's also high on my wife's list, but I think that has a lot more to do with shirtless Ryan Reynolds. His version of Amityville, I find superior to the original, mostly because Margot Kidder. Nah, I'm okay. We don't need any more of that. She was bad as Lois Lane, and she's bad in that movie. Ryan Reynolds begins to show depth as an actor that he'll go on to show by really embodying that character. And the scene I'm going to show you guys, the wood chopping scene, that's one of the scariest. It's so tense and suspenseful and scary that I still have a hard time watching it without being a little on edge.
Now hold it steady. 'Cause if you get shaky, I get shaky.
What, are you crying?
And number one, with a bullet or a flamethrower. This is your mic drop moment when it comes to horror remakes. Because John Carpenter's The Thing is an incredible film, and a lot of people don't even realize that it's actually a remake. What's kind of fun for those of you who are Carpenter files like myself, The Thing is what little Lindsay Wallace is watching before Michael Myers starts to wreak havoc on her night trying to get to know Tommy Doyle. They were in second grade, so I don't know. This whole thing's weird. The movie is fantastic. The effects for their time, not even for their time, they still hold up as being some of the best special effects. But the level of tension created on that set, it just pops, it keeps going, and it doesn't let up. The cast is top to bottom, a excellent cast that is star-studded, that you might even not know their names, but you might recognize them like the president from Clear and Present Danger. Apparently doesn't learn anything about leadership in that movie because he's not a very good president in Clear and Present Danger. You got the guy that survives in Platoon with you got the guy who survives in Platoon with Charlie Sheen. You have the freaking oatmeal guy, and of course, you have Kurt Russell and another team up with John Carpenter. Those two would create a lot of weird different movies together, but this one I think might be the best one.
I know I'm human. And if you were all these things, then you just attack me right now. So some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to.
And with that, viewers and listeners, we must say goodbye to Halloween. We're going to be back next week. We've got some fun topics coming up for the first season of this show. We're going to talk about John Cazale and the really just tragic and amazing career he had. We're going to look at Christmas movies, obviously. We're going to look at baseball films. We're going to talk movies and some comics and even the occasional novel because I can read. But until then, and even we're going to talk about the occasional novel. And we're even going to talk about the occasional novel because, unlike what some people might think, I can read real good.